ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be IB History World War II in the Americas, paper 3 topic for higher level students. What I've done right here is I have gone through and taken the Oxford Companion textbook and put it into a easy to understand PowerPoint presentation. Now, with that being said, you still need to read the textbook, okay? What I'm going to be giving you here is just going to be the overlay, kind of the main key concepts, but it is crucially important for your understanding that you have also gone through the text and read the text to get a deeper understanding of exactly the information that is going to be present in this presentation and the information that you will need to know to be successful on paper 3. Now, I've broken this up section by section, so it's going to be a bunch of different videos in this playlist explaining exactly the information from each individual section. So my high recommendation for you would be to listen to one of these videos and then go back and read that section of the text, making sure you understand exactly what's taking place in that section, and then bring me any questions or concerns that you might have relating to that section. So with that, we're going to dive into 1.1, Diplomacy in the Americas in the 1930s. Now, when we're talking about diplomacy in the Americas in the 1930s, the first thing that we absolutely must understand is Franklin Delano Roosevelt's policy, known as the Good Neighbor Policy, and the implications and the applications and the effects of this policy on the real development of relations between the United States and the other countries located in the Americas. Now, when I'm talking about the Americas right through here, do understand I'm referring to North and South America as a whole. If you hear something like American in here, it's going to be, for the most part, relating to North and South America. So when you hear American, don't think just the United States. I'm going to be saying the U.S. when I'm referring to the United States. American in this instance, in this section, is going to refer really to North and South America as a whole. Now, it's important to understand that historically speaking, the United States of America is going to have this thing called the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, this is going to come about in the 1800s by President James Monroe. And in the Monroe Doctrine, he basically states that North and South America are closed to European expansion. This is kind of like the proverbial dog peeing on a fire hydrant. A dog pees on a fire hydrant for one of two reasons. Number one, that dog's got to go pee. Number two is to mark its territory. This is like the United States marking its territory. Europeans, stay out of North and South America. This is our sphere of influence as Americans. We're going to control this. You're not going to control this. And then this is going to expand with the Roosevelt corollary with President Teddy Roosevelt, okay, Franklin's old cousin, right through here. And this one's going to basically state the Monroe Doctrine and be an expansion of that. So North and South America is close to European expansion and European sphere of influence. And if you try it, we're going to use guns to defend it. So it's really taking the Monroe Doctrine and expanding upon that. Then we're going to get President Herbert Hoover coming in, elected in 1928 and starting in 1929. Hoover has a plan of improving United States-Latin American relations. So a little bit of background history right on this leading up, especially with like the Spanish-American War in the late 1800s, the United States is really going to be kind of exerting its influence and colonial power over Central and Latin America. And that is something that a lot of these Latin American countries do not like. The United States is going to implement troops and actually deploy troops and have them really staying in these countries for a extended period of time. And this has really damaged United States relations with Central and Latin America, okay, and South America as well. So President Hoover has plans of improving relations with Latin America. However, that's going to change because in October of 1929, we get the Great Depression. And that is a major, major event when it comes to the history of the world, political world, that is. And that's something that's going to take precedence. Okay, so Hoover is going to be really distracted, even though he's not really doing much, with the Great Depression. And he's going to be focusing almost extensively on the Great Depression. So he is not going to be able to really do anything when it comes to improving his relations with Central and South America. So do understand that. Now, also at this time, we're going to get the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Now, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act is an incredibly important thing to understand when you're talking about United States relations with Central and Latin American countries. So what it's going to do is this is going to create a series of tariffs on goods that are imported from outside of the United States. Now, a tariff is simply a tax on a good. So, for example, if I'm going to be importing oranges from a Central American country, I'm going to include a 5% tariff on top of that. Meaning there's a 5% tax on this good. Now, tariffs are usually implemented as a way of protecting goods within an individual country. So, for example, maybe the United States wants people to buy American oranges, so American oranges don't have this extra 5% tax on them. As we understand from rule of economics, tariffs and taxes are always passed off onto the consumer. So in reality, if you have a dozen American oranges costing $1, those oranges would be costing $1 coming in from outside of the United States, but when you add that tariff on, it's going to be an additional 5%. So it's going to actually cost $1.05, meaning you're going to be buying the American ones. So tariffs are really a way of trying to increase revenue from a country. However, this is going to have a number of negative effects on really relations with these other countries. And it's going to hurt American trade with these other countries because they're not going to be trading because it's more expensive. Now, FDR is going to be elected president in 1932, predominantly due to Hoover's inability to control the Great Depression. And when he comes in his inaugural address in March of 1933, he's going to outline his good neighbor policy. He's going to state that the United States is going to be a good neighbor to Latin America. Now, this is going to be the official launch of the good neighbor policy. And now, in the good neighbor policy, he's going to state that the United States is not going to get involved in the internal affairs of Latin American states. What Latin American states are doing domestically is their own concerns. Latin American countries are going to believe it when they see it. The United States has a history of talking a lot and not actually implementing these policies. So Latin America is like, good idea, Franklin. I'll believe it when you actually implement these policies. Then in December of 1933, we're going to get the 7th International Conference of American States. And this is when the Good Neighbor Policy is going to be declared operational. So it was previously announced during Roosevelt's inaugural address in March of 1933. However, it's officially going to be operational and in action when we get to the 7th International Conference of American States, December of 1933. Then we're going to get the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States. This is going to be signed by 19 American countries, and it's going to go into effect in 1934. This is basically stating, again, when it comes to that non-intervention policy, they're going to agree to not intervene in the affairs of countries that are domestic affairs of other American countries. Now, the United States is going to also withdraw troops from Haiti and Nicaragua. At this time, they're going to abrogate the Platt Amendment, which basically means to change the Platt Amendment. Now, the Platt Amendment comes about after the Spanish-American War in relation to Cuba. So previously, before the Spanish-American War, Cuba was controlled by the Spanish. Now, the United States are going to come in and they're going to beat the Spanish in the Spanish-American War. They're going to promise Cuba independence. However, when they promise Cuba independence, there's going to be a real big asterisk next to that, basically stating that you're independent, but ultimately we control what you do. So in reality, Cuba was a puppet state of the United States of America. The Platt Amendment was what established that. Now, they're going to get rid of the Platt Amendment and change it. So Cuba is going to have a lot more independence rights, and it's going to be a way of really showing the Cubans that we're serious in this. Withdrawing troops from Haiti and Nicaragua are going to be doing the exact same thing. It's going to be the way the United States is going to show its commitment to the good neighbor policy. Then we're going to get to the 1936 Buenos Aires Conference, and this is when the United States and these American countries are going to meet, and they're going to say that force will not be used to protect property or citizens abroad. So if there's an American company operating in, say, Peru, and the Peruvian government is doing something that's going to hurt that company, their bottom line, the United States is not going to send in military force to protect property or citizens that are abroad. Basically, it's just taking this agreement a little bit further from the Montevideo Conference, where they're talking about really not getting involved. It's going to be taking it further. Additionally, it's going to be stating that businesses have to obey the local laws. So just because you're an American company doesn't mean you get to discredit the laws of these countries where you're operating in. You have to obey by the local laws. The United States is not going to protect you if you're not obeying by these local laws, even if you're an American company. Mexico and Argentina are going to be insistent that the policy of the American countries are not driven by the interest of solely the United States of America. The United States of America is the most powerful country in the American sphere, but Mexico and Argentina are going to be stating that while they are the most powerful, it is not going to be the United States that's determining what we're doing. We are going to do what's best for the Americas as a whole, not what is best for simply the United States. Now, we're going to get the Buenos Aires Convention, and this is going to be controversial in the United States. Now, this is controversial primarily because business feels threatened. This is not going to, the United States is not going to get involved and protect American businesses abroad. So they feel that this is a threat, that they are no longer protected by their country. Now, remember, this is in the middle of the Great Depression as well, so business is already threatened, and they're not really very happy with what's going on. They're going to be thinking about whether or not this actually protects the economic interest of the United States. How are these American companies, who really are bringing in the money to the United States, how is the United States refusing to protect them, protecting the economic interest of the United States? That's going to be the counter argument right through here. The United States intervening to protect the interest would not constitute intervention in internal affairs, but instead a matter of protection is what the United States is ultimately going to state as a response to this. Now, this is going to be seen as a threat to the agreement. Basically, it's like, it's not going to be an international affair when it's done to constitute the intervention as a matter of protecting these individual companies. That's not seen as getting involved in the internal affairs. Basically, the argument is internal affairs are things that are affecting just you and what's going on with you. With this American company, it's not really a matter of internal affairs. Now, justifiably so, a lot of Latin American countries are going to see this as a threat to their agreement. However, ultimately, the United States would protect their interest through diplomatic non-recognition rather than force. So basically saying, you can say what you want, we don't accept who you are, you're wrong. So go with it. Take it or leave it. Again, this is a way of kind of staying within the lines of both. You are protecting the interest of business. However, you're also not intervening and interfering in these countries. Non-interventionism is going to be welcomed by other countries, okay? And this is going to be seen as a way for them to get onto the American market where the economy is going to be stronger. Remember, Great Depression is going on. Other countries don't really have a lot. United States doesn't have a lot, but it's got more than the other countries. There's going to be the Export-Import Bank, which is established to facilitate commercial loans to companies that are importing goods from the United States. So they're going to be giving loans to these foreign countries in the Americas that are taking and buying from the United States as a way of stimulating the economies of the United States. But it's also a way of stimulating the economies of these Latin American countries and establishing good relations, good economic relations between the United States and Latin America. We're then going to get the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act, which is allowing the government to negotiate bilateral agreements to reduce tariffs. So this is basically when the United States is going to recognize that Smoot-Hawley had a series of negative impacts on relations between the United States and Latin America, had a number of negative economic impacts as well, which really didn't help with the Great Depression at all. So it's going to be basically saying, like, Smoot-Hawley might have had a good idea and good intentions, but in reality, there was a number of negative consequences of that. We need to make sure that these are taken care of. Now, by 1938, the United States was the main trading partner for the American countries, with the exception of Argentina. Argentina is going to see the United Kingdom and Europe as the future and not the United States. So they're going to be kind of the lone duck right through here, really continuing to trade with Europe and United Kingdom compared to trading with the United States. Germany at this time, 1933, Hitler's coming to power, wants to get involved in South America. And they're actually going to be doubling their trade with countries like Brazil between 1933 and 1938. Brazil has a large German population as well. Just makes sense right through there. Germany, though, is suffering from major economic crisis at this time period. And they're going to be using and paying in compensation marks. Now, compensation marks are basically an IOU, and it's going to be used only to purchase German goods. Okay, so you can use this to buy stuff from German companies. It's a good way of ensuring that they're going to be buying from Germany. However, this is not as desirable as the US dollar because the US dollar can be used anywhere. These German compensation marks can only be used in Germany. Now, there's going to be a series of unintended consequences of these acts. Now, number one is the Latin American economies and the United States economy are going to be tied together. There's not really a way to break these two apart right here. So if something goes wrong with one of them, it's going to go wrong with all of them. This is going to lead to a series of complications after World War II. Number two is oil is going to be a point of conflict for the United States and Latin America. Nothing has really changed in terms of oil being a point of conflict. If you look at really any part of history between this time and 2021. Bolivia is going to be the country that's really going to kind of get this going. They're going to confiscate properties of the Standard Oil Company in March of 1937. They're going to say that Standard Oil Company, SOC, is going to be committing illegal actions by selling their oil to Argentina without the approval of Bolivia. Bolivia is like, not going to happen. The Export-Import Bank is going to respond to this by denying Bolivia loans. Then in 1940, when war breaks out, the United States is going to basically concede to what Bolivia wants. They're going to agree to sell Standard Oil Company to Bolivia, in Bolivia, not the whole company, for $1.5 million. Standard Oil Company is not exactly happy by this, but they really don't have any option. The United States is realizing that there are bigger fish to fry in 1940 than dealing with a oil dispute in Bolivia. Then in March of 1938, so previously, Mexico is going to expropriate U.S., Dutch, and British oil companies, basically make them their own. The Secretary of State of the United States is going to demand compensation to U.S. companies and ultimately threaten to intervene if Mexico does not pay for what they have just taken. So expropriate is when you take a company and make it part of your country's portfolio, so to speak. So this is going to be a Mexican-owned company owned by the Mexican government. United States companies are like, you just stole this from us. This isn't okay. The Secretary of State is going to demand intervention. Ultimately, though, FDR is going to back down and state that he is not going to intervene. And is kind of going to basically call his bluff of his own Secretary of State. Mexico is going to be refused loans, is going to terminate silver contracts with the United States, and there's going to be a series of boycotts of American products in Mexico. Mexico is then going to reach an agreement with the Axis, and this is an urgency of war is going to cause the United States to ultimately form an agreement because the United States, although being neutral, is definitely opposed to the Axis powers, and this is ultimately going to lead them to form an agreement with Mexico. Then we're going to get the willingness of the United States to negotiate with Bolivia and Mexico, and this is going to be caused by the onset of war. So it's important to understand that the United States did have these issues with Mexico and Bolivia over oil. However, at the end of the day, the fact that they're about to start a war and there's about to be a major, major world war going on, that's going to be more important and more impactful for the United States. And that's a bigger fish for them to fry. So they're ultimately going to kind of concede to what Mexico and Bolivia want solely because there's a bigger crisis going on. Between 1939 and 1941, the policy the good neighbor policy is going to increase, particularly in terms of military assistance. This is going to be important. They realize that war is on the brink. Okay, in 1939, we've got the start of World War II in Europe. The United States is not going to get involved. The only American country that gets involved at this point is Canada. But the military assistance is going to really, really ramp up at this time period. Cultural component of the good neighbor policy is huge. Okay. There's going to be a positive portrayal of the United States in Latin America, just in general. No longer is the United States going to be seen as kind of this big bully up north. It's going to be seen as a positive light, okay? United States radio, press, and movies are going to show Latin America in a positive light. We're going to get a number of Latin American movie stars come in, different types of music, not TV shows, I guess, because they're not around, radio shows, in the newspaper, different things are going to be presenting in different ways. And Latin America is now seen in a positive light, where that previously was not the case. We're going to get the 1939 World's Fair in New York City. Many Latin American countries are actually going to send delegations to represent their country, kind of seen as an act of goodwill between the United States and these Latin American countries. And ultimately, the results of the good neighbor policy are going to be mixed, okay? Some are going to say that this is very, very good. Some is going to say, not quite so much. It was the golden era of United States relations with Latin America. This was really the best it's ever been between the United States and Latin America. And that's really important to understand. It's also an argument that this is going to allow these Latin American states to form stable governments, something that ultimately probably would not have happened nearly as quickly if it were not for the good neighbor policy. Others see it simply as a way of the United States trying to maintain dominance or their own economy. So if the United States gets all these countries to be really heavily reliant on the American economy, the United States has a lot of bargaining power over these countries and can really get what they want. Realistically, the impact of the Great Depression kind of kept the United States from getting involved anyways, because the United States couldn't afford to send troops into these Latin American countries, even if they wanted to. So there is also the argument that right here, this was just really a way for the Americans to save face, to say, hey, I'm not going to be sending these troops down here because I want to do the right thing. In reality, they wouldn't be doing it anyways because they couldn't afford it. But this is a way of kind of getting on their good side and ultimately getting them to do what you want. So there's going to be an argument on either side. I would be able to argue either side of this, whether some of the positive and some of the negative effects of the good neighbor policy. That is all for now. If you have any questions or comments, put it down below. I'll happily answer those questions. Go ahead and read this section of the text, make sure it makes sense, and we will go on from there. See you later. Good luck.